Do you remember a time when you could have a rational conversation with people, where you could have a chat with someone who might have different ideas and different opinions to yourself, but you could keep it friendly and you could actually maybe find some middle ground, some common ground? This was a time before social media. This was a time before polarising mainstream media, where everyone has to fall into one camp or another. Look at Brexit. This may have been the real hub of it all, where it all started. You couldn't have had a moderate opinion but voted one way or the other. You had to be Team Brexit or you had to be Team Leave. And if you were one or the other, you had to fling mud at the other side and call them all the names under the sun. If you were a Remainer and talking about Leave people, you had to call them Nazis and far right and, racists and all the rest of it. And if you were on the Leave side and you were talking about the Remainers, you had to call them Ramonas and tell them that they were unpatriotic and, whipped by the EU. It was absolute nonsense. But this is where it all started, where this polarisation of opinions occurred, where you could no longer sit down and have a chat with people of maybe a slightly different opinion, but find that middle ground and find that you're actually not too far apart at all, but maybe you just disagree on a couple of fundamental items. Social media. Social media is what did it. Social media is the reason why we can no longer have pleasant conversations, while people are falling out and arguing and calling names, people that they otherwise get along with, people that they would normally consider friends. They're insulting, they're arguing with, and they're causing animosity between groups of people who should just be getting along. And it's not our fault. We are conditioned to do this. We're being told to do this by the mainstream media, and social media is helping to perpetuate this. We are being told we have to be on one side or the other, depending on what publications you read. If you read the Daily Mail, then you're going to believe things in more of a right-wing slant, and that isn't a criticism of people who read the Daily Mail, or indeed people who believe things in a right-wing way. If you watch the BBC and you take the BBC news as gospel, then you're likely to see things in a more left-wing way and believe things in a left-wing way, and you believe that regardless if it's the same story or not, you believe that the people reading the same story on the other side are wrong, that they're imbeciles, there's something wrong with them, and you feel compelled to argue against them. And this is where we are with the current lockdown situation. It was the same with the previous one, but it's even more so with this one. We are told that we have to be either in pro-lockdown camp, in which case you might get called sheep or sheeple or something, whatever those other names I came up with in my last video were, or you have to be anti-lockdown. You have to think it's all a farce, all a conspiracy, that somehow it's the big reset or some sort of control agenda. It's basically 1984 all over again. And there's no room for middle ground. You have to narrow your colours to the mast, and you have to disagree with the people on the other side. Like somehow they are the enemy. They're not the enemy. They are probably perfectly rational human beings who have just formed a slightly different opinion to your own. And if you actually sat down and talked to them in sentences of more than 248 characters, whatever the hell it is on Twitter, if you sat down and had a conversation with them, you would find that you shared a lot of middle ground. You shared a lot of the same opinions. But you're being told that these people are the enemy. Now, what gets me, and the biggest thing that gets me in the title of this video, is this argument from the pro-lockdown camp. I'm not saying we shouldn't lock down, okay? I'm saying that my opinion is that we shouldn't, right? I'll put that out there now. But I'm saying there are arguments why we should have locked down, and I think it's perfectly acceptable to hold that view. But the view that I cannot stand is that it's somehow a toss-up between lives and the economy, and the two have to be mutually exclusive. They use this as a stick to beat you with. Anyone who questions the current lockdown regulations, anyone who questions these infringements on our freedoms, they will use this economy versus lives argument to beat you with. But it's not that simple. Like I say, the two are not mutually exclusive. And what they want you to do is they want you to vision lives as poor granny on a ventilator in a hospital bed, taking her last breaths. Now, yes, of course, that has happened, and that is terrible, and that is tragic, and that is a personal tragedy for a lot of people. I'm not belittling it, but that is what they want you to see lives as. On the other hand, they want you to see the economy as city fat cats in their suits, smoking cigars, quaffing champagne and bowler hats on, singing "We're in the Money," or talking about stocks and shares and all the rest of it. They see that as the economy, and they see poor old granny on her deathbed as lives. But there is so much middle ground between the two. Now, even if we're talking just lives, as in people living or dying, there are not just these old grannies on the ventilator beds. There are a scope of other people whose lives, in that respect, are affected by this lockdown. The suicide rates are climbing. This is a fact. And although it can't be directly attributed to lockdowns, it's very hard to find an alternative explanation. People are missing routine checkups, routine appointments. So people who may have life-threatening conditions that aren't yet diagnosed, those diagnoses go missed. Those diagnoses are missed because these people aren't able to get to those appointments. People who require cancer treatment are being deferred treatment or refused treatment because hospitals and the health service are focusing on COVID cases. There will be an indirect cost to physical lives other than Granny dying of COVID on her deathbed. So that is not cut and dry. And if we extend that further and say, well, maybe lives isn't just a case of life or death. Maybe it's not just a matter of life or death. Maybe there's more to life than just being alive. And now we talk about mental health issues, the massive mental health epidemic that's going to happen in this country as a fallout of this lockdown. And we're not just talking about the mental health implications of being stuck at home. We're talking about actual direct mental health implications from people losing their houses, from losing their jobs, from struggling financially, struggling to support their families and possibly ending up homeless. So we're not talking necessarily about mental health conditions, but also direct impact on people's mental health from actual events that are directly linked to this lockdown. And that surely has to come under the heading of lives as well. Being alive is not the entirety of life. Being alive physically is one thing. Having a life is a completely different thing. So let's look at the other side, the economy, those fat cats in bowler hats and cigars singing "We're in the money" while quaffing champagne, eating cigar and laughing at the peasants. Eating cigar? That doesn't make any sense. That's not the economy. The economy is so much more far-reaching than that. Everything around you is the economy. We live in a capitalist society, and that is not a dirty word. Capitalism is not a dirty word. The alternative is socialism, and we don't necessarily want to go there. The economy is everything. The economy is the rent you pay. The economy is the roof over your head. The economy is the money you have to spend in Sainsbury's to get your shopping. The money is the money that's paid to the farmers to get the food, to put it in the shops so you can go and buy it. The economy is getting paid at the end of the month. The economy is allowing your children to go to a state-funded school. The economy is the NHS. Whenever we do get to use that again, the economy is the NHS. That is something that's part of the economy. Everything is part of the economy. The economics isn't fat cat bankers. It's the very fabric of the country that we live in. It's the very basis of how we live our lives, how we trade, how we all survive through mutually beneficial work and by the trading of goods and services and products and all the rest of it. That is the economy. So when you're considering lives versus the economy, we're not talking just about old granny on her deathbed. Yeah, and I know I'm saying that quite flippantly, and I appreciate that obviously it is there will have been people who have lost family members, and it is tragic. So my apologies for being a bit flippant about it. But I think this is being used as an image to perpetuate an argument which is ill thought out. We can't sacrifice our economy purely for the sake of these hypothetical lives. Certainly not when we don't know how many lives may be lost indirectly through lack of treatment, lack of diagnosis, mental health issues, suicide and all the rest of it. So I am very happy to listen to pro-lockdown arguments. I don't think that lockdown is completely without its merits or without its basis. I don't think it's a complete scam, it's a complete hoax. And I do understand why there may be people who are genuinely afraid to go and mix and mingle and socialise with other people. I do understand that. And whilst I may sit on the other side of the fence, it doesn't mean that I can't find some middle ground with people who may hold a different opinion to me. But now, in a world where we have to basically be A or B, let's try and find some middle ground. Let's try and actually talk about things. Let's try and have sensible conversations and actually, discuss why we think a certain way and allow others to voice their opinions and take them on board and maybe consider that, we have a bit of a polarised view, or maybe we've been fed a polarised view, and that because of confirmation bias, we are reading, we are watching YouTube videos on, and we are accepting opinions that are ones that only agree with ourselves. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. If you like the video and you like hearing me rant about random stuff, then do consider subscribing. And thanks again for watching.